Welcome to the cemetery. I will be reading a short story written by me. Enjoy. The Haunted. In a small town down in Georgia, a family recently moved into an old house by a shady bayou. John, his wife Jenny, and their 2 young children. Little did they know, this quiet piece of property was harboring a dark secret that would change the perception of the entire town. A few weeks after moving in, strange things started happening. Their personal belongings would come up missing, floorboards would creak in the dead of night, and pictures would occasionally fall off the walls. They didn't think much of it at first. They assumed it was because the house was so old. After a while, they couldn't ignore the reality of the situation. Emily, the youngest, was the first to witness the perpetrator of the strange events. One night, she woke up to the sounds of tapping on her headboard. She looked down at the foot of her bed and saw a shadowy black silhouette of a man with long claws and a crooked neck. As the entity stretched out his hand towards her, Emily screamed, waking up her parents. John and Jenny ran into her room. As soon as they turned on the lights, the entity vanished. Emily was inconsolable as Jenny held her tight, trying to comfort her. John escorted Emily's older brother, who had also been woken up by her screams, back to his room. After a while, the entity fed off their fears and grew stronger. In the days that followed, claw marks were found on the walls and on their headboards. Chairs and other heavy objects would fly across the room in broad daylight. The family sought counsel at the local church. After explaining the situation, the priest agreed to come by the house and attempt a cleansing. Later that week, he came by and was welcomed in by the family. As soon as he walked in the door, he was overwhelmed with fear. His rosary was ripped out of his hands by an invisible force, and his cross necklace burned his skin. The presence of the priest that day only escalated the entity's rage and made him angrier. Jenny would wake up each night with scratches on her skin. The family would occasionally find Emily sleepwalking through the home and banging her head into walls. John and Jordan, for the most part, were left alone, other than Jordan no longer speaking. The town grew suspicious of John due to the cuts and bruises on his wife and daughter. Luckily, nothing ever came about it. The family was outcasted by the townspeople, especially John. After a while, the entity was able to show itself completely and was about to achieve its objective. One stormy night, John went downstairs, walked into the kitchen, and came face to face with the entity. It was tall, hairy, and had a long mouth with razor-sharp teeth. Its fingers stretched out to about a foot, with long black claws that appeared to be covered in tar. The entity didn't notice him yet. John stood in silence, staring in shock, as the entity held Emily in his hands. The entity opened up his large mouth and began to tilt Emily towards it. John screamed, "No!" at the top of his lungs. The entity turned his head and growled so loud the house shook. John sprinted at the entity, knocking him off balance. Emily fell to the ground, covered in slimy drool, too petrified to move. Jenny and John ran into the kitchen, right when John was being thrown across the room and into a wall. Jenny didn't know what to do. She wanted to help John, but also wanted to save Emily. Without any way to help them, Jenny and Jordan just stood in the kitchen and watched in horror as the entity picked Emily back up, swallowing her whole. He looked at them, growling. The entity then disappeared in a blink of an eye, taking Emily along with him to the depths of hell, where the entity will use her soul to one day return and finish what he started. Jenny dropped to her knees with zero expression on her face, not knowing how to process what just happened. Jordan didn't react at all. He just stared at where Emily just was, completely shell-shocked from witnessing something so horrific. The police, along with the priest, showed up to the house later that night, but with no logical explanation to what happened to Emily. John and Jenny was convicted of murder and is now serving life sentences. But for Jordan, he has dedicated his life to prove his parents' innocence and to somehow bring back his long-lost sister. Thank you for visiting the cemetery. I hope you enjoyed the story. Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment and let me know what you thought of the story. More to come. Thank you.